because you just did.
Yeah, that's good. Our presentation today is on fires, floods, and earthquakes. Oh no! We want to talk today about property protection. How do we protect our buildings and our personnel as well, and all of our facilities that we have out there from some of these natural disasters and maybe not so natural disasters that might happen to in our communities. And this is one that we probably don't want to think about too much. We end up going, oh, that's not going to happen here. You know, that giant earthquake's not going to happen in this neck of the woods. We're not going to have a flood. But we have to be realistic that these things do happen, and they can happen in our neighborhood. I was amazed watching some of the footage of the Teton Dam collapse that happened 40 years ago up in the Idaho Falls area, or Rexburg area in Idaho. We could have a disaster of that proportion that close to where we live here. Was just amazing to look at that. I remember back being a child and having people go on buses up there to help out with the cleanup from that disaster, and some of the things that we see here with the trust. We've had some pretty major fires, floods. To this point, and I'll keep knocking on some wood, we haven't had a major earthquake in some time within the state, but we're due for that. So we want to talk about these subjects and really put some time into our facilities, looking out there, what are our risks and what do we need to do to minimize those and be prepared should the bad thing happen. Many of you are going to be the entities that your communities will look to when an emergency like this happens, and hopefully you're well prepared and you're set up so you can respond at the time and help other people out. All right, if I can get my clicker to work here. All right, number one, we want to identify our property risks. We need to know what we own, what type of buildings, even things like playgrounds. We may put tens of thousands and sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars into a playground. Is that a piece of property that ought to be insured, that ought to be scheduled? Well, that's your decision to make, but definitely we recommend that you look at all of your facilities and make a decision. Make sure those facilities are scheduled. Make sure that they've been listed with us. Make sure we've gone out and done a property appraisal on those so we have accurate numbers there, so you have protection when something happens. People think, oh, it's a playground. You know, what's going to happen to that? We have had situations that involved arson where people would go out and pour gasoline on the playground equipment and light it on fire. Well, all of a sudden we've lost a piece of playground equipment. And if it hasn't been scheduled, then it's not listed on your property insurance and may not be covered. Think about your property as well. Property inside of your buildings. Look at all the buildings, and what about inside? Do you have things that are of great value, fine art, or other things that are not normal, that may need to have their own additional coverage? Talk to your account executive here with the trust, and they can walk you through if there needs to be additional coverage. But you want to take an inventory of what you have in your facilities. So, and for that matter, in our own homes. A few years ago, we had a rash of home fires with city managers down in southern Utah. How many was that, Doug? It seemed like we had three city managers down in southern Utah who all had their homes burned down within just a short amount of time. Would have made me nervous to be a city manager there. I think somebody had an axe to grind. But anyway, it was kind of a scary thing, and it's a disaster if your home burns down and you don't have accurate records. So the same thing goes for our facilities wherever we work. What type of contents do we have, and what's an easy way to document that? It's pretty easy to go and walk through with a video camera and just kind of point these things out. Now, we should take good inventories. If we've got things of value, we should have an inventory list and keep track of that. Whether you schedule that or not is really up to you, but having those records can definitely help out should a disaster happen. Just one thought on this. We want to make sure that we're covering ourselves. We've had situations in the past where a decision had been made not to cover a piece of property, and then something happened to it, a fire or other disaster that happened, and then there were fingers pointed. Well, why wasn't that scheduled? And none of us wants to be on the end of those pointing fingers. So if you make a decision to not schedule something, get your governing body, your council, commission, board, whatever it may be, get them to go along with that. Whether it's a written sign off or just in a meeting, you bring that up. Here are the properties that we're scheduling with the Trust for Property Coverage. And here are ones that we've made a decision not to do that. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Property coverage is probably the cheapest coverage that you can get out there, and I wouldn't want to risk losing a property like that. But anyway, just cover yourself. Ensure that you've let the governing body know we've made a decision not to cover this, and this is the reason. It's going to cost us X number of dollars, and we're not going to do that. And they may or may not go along with that. Once again, document what you own. So that Beanie Baby collection that you have out there, we want to document how valuable that is. Just for your own personal use, there's an application out there for smartphones called Know Your Stuff, and that's a great way to document your home contents. You can also take a video clip walking through your facilities, but make sure to save that somewhere that you can get if your building burns down. Okay. All right. Other things, other standard practices that we should use in handling our property issues involve our preparedness. Monthly facility inspections. We preach this a lot through our Trust Accountability Program. Having a program in place that helps us to identify problems and correct those things. Those monthly inspections are a big part of your preparedness. So as part of those monthly inspections, you should include inspecting the fire extinguishers, inspecting the emergency lighting, and any of that other emergency equipment, AEDs and the such, to ensure that they're in working condition, that they're in place. I can't tell you how many times Brent, Doug, and myself have been out walking around in your facilities, and we found a fire extinguisher missing, or it was out of date, or the gauge was outside of the green zone, and it just wasn't ready to function. So those monthly inspections are really important. One great way that you can bolster that is by adding an inventory tag on all of that emergency equipment. So we have a list of what materials we own, the type of equipment it is, how often it should be inspected and serviced. So then when the fire extinguisher contractor comes out to do his regular check on your facility, you can hand that person a list of all of your fire extinguishers, and they can check them off as they go. And that helps us to prevent skipping some of that equipment. It also helps to add that onto your monthly inspection checklist. And let's see, I'm trying to think. Oh, boilers and pressure vessels. Also another thing to consider. I didn't put that on another slide, but these are real serious causes of many building fires. So if you have a boiler, if you have large pressure vessels on your compressed air system, those need to be registered with the state, and it should be inspected on a regular frequency, depending on the size, the BTUs of the boiler. They may do that on a more often frequency. But take a look at what type of equipment is out there. Those boilers have gas valves and other safety equipment on there that need to have a regular inspection to make sure that they work. Okay. And document your inspections. That's an important thing that I can't say enough. It's essential that we document what we do. Okay, and I'm going to refer back to some mobile applications. There are other ones there, but I identified the American Red Cross has built a number of applications that are really handy. They're focused on you know, a residential exposure, but it can benefit us in business and other things. It helps in preparedness, and mobile applications are easy because you can use it anywhere you're at. So I'll refer back to these. This first one that's showing here is a first aid. It's a free app. All of these apps from the Red Cross are free, and I think they're available on all the different platforms, and it's really easy to get the information from those. All right. Let's go through some of the normal property exposures. Fires. You know, and it's really easy to say, well, fire's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen to that property. This picture here is of a fire that happened to one of our members' water tanks. You think, yeah, water tank up on the side of the mountain? How's that going to catch on fire? Well, this was actually an arson fire. Some bad person was out and he had an axe to grind or whatever his problem was. He lit a fire, and it impacted this water tank and ended up being $1 million loss, property loss. We all pay for that loss. That's how the trust works, how a pool works. We pool our resources, and so when something really crazy and bad like this happens, we've got coverage there to handle it. But you know, you think about that for a smaller city. This was a huge loss and could have been a killer had they not had coverage that way. However, we all would do better if we prevented this in a number of different ways. How do you prevent an arsonist? Well, that's kind of difficult. However, in this situation, if we had cleared the brush and combustible materials away from the outside of this water tank, we probably would not have lost the facility. If we could have put some fireproof materials in the construction, that definitely would have helped as well. Okay, I'm going to dive in so I don't go too long here. Sources of fire. We have a lot of different ways that we can burn our buildings down or impact other parts of our property. External sources of fire, wildland fires, and you know, we've all got to stand back and look at our facilities and say, do we have exposure to wildland fire? The trust office, we're sitting here in the middle of North Salt Lake. We don't have exposure to wildland fires. However, many of your communities are right on the interface with wild lands, where you have forests or grass or other sources out on that range or forest land that could directly impact your operations. And so you have to take different precautions than somebody who is in a purely urban area like we are here in North Salt Lake. Fireworks, common cause of fires out there. What do we allow in our given jurisdiction, and how do we control that? We've had a great spring with rains that have produced lots of vegetation in those interface areas, and now it's going to turn off really hot. And by the 4th of July, we'll be ripe for wildland fires and fires in our neighborhoods. So think about that and how we go about lighting those fireworks off. I've got to take a little divergence here on fireworks. I've talked about this a lot with in our special events management and planning webinars. But just remember that if you're lighting off fireworks in your city, town, district, counties, whatever it may be, you need to have your shooters be a certified shooter. If they're not, then you're outside of the law, and it's not a good thing. We did have a really serious fireworks accident last year, and we don't want to repeat that. So let's look at that. And just because somebody is a firefighter doesn't mean that they're a certified shooter. So investigate that. And if you've got more questions on it, give us a call. Internal fires many times happen from dumb things that we do that we don't think about doing, and we'll go through a few of those. Hot work, welding, cutting, brazing, those type of things. Electrical fires are a really common source of burning our buildings down, and flammable liquids is something that we're exposed to as well. We'll hit each of those just briefly. So kind of on the dumb ways to burn your building down list of things to do, candles are probably on the top of that list. If you don't have a policy on candles, you should get a policy on candles and open flames. Just ban all open sources of flame in your workplace unless it falls under a hot work permit. That's the best way to do that. You can have smelly candles in your workplace. They have some nice candle heaters that are UL listed that are not going to burn your building down. But if you light a fire, we've got a risk of burning your building down. Other things that we deal with in our buildings are those space heaters, and they're definitely something that you have older buildings that don't have good ventilation or good heating in the winter time, or there are problems with the HVAC system. We don't advocate a full-on ban. I would love it if we did, but we realize that that's something that's probably going to happen in many of our workplaces. But let's make sure that we have a policy on those. If you have a space heater and you leave it running when you're not at your desk, you lose the space heater. You lose the privilege of having that. If you don't turn it off at the end of the day, you definitely lose that. To have a policy in place that governs that. And let's make sure that we've got appropriate space heaters as well. Approve all of those. Make sure they have the third prong, that grounding prong on the plug, and make sure they have tip over protection. If they tip over, does the heater turn off so it doesn't catch the carpet on fire or that pile of papers that are under your desk. I just had a comment here. Jane said a coworker left a whistling teapot on the burner to make tea and burned up the teapot. Yeah, absolutely. Those type of things, people bringing in appliances, whether it's a teapot or a toaster oven, something like that. Let's, as part of our monthly inspections, look at what's in the break room as well. Are those appliances going to end up causing us trouble? If it's not being used, unplug it. Pretty simple way to prevent many fires. All right. Next one seems like a simple one, but it's just looking at smoking. Have a policy on smoking that designates where it is appropriate to smoke and where people may not smoke. Have adequate facility. If you're going to allow smoking, provide some facilities for those smokers so they can go and do it in a safe place, and not have those unextinguished cigarette butts end up in some flammable materials. You need to police those on a regular basis, and that's a great way to prevent fires as well. A few things, basics of fire prevention. Think about your egress route. When's the last time that you've gone and had a drill on evacuation from your facility? If it's been more than a year, you should have one this week. Let's do it right now and see how we do. Think about your routes of egress. Have multiple routes. Keep your hydrants clear. Go and check around those. If you have a sprinkler system in your buildings, those need to be tested on a regular basis, at least annually. You can do that on your own if you're trained to be able to do that. But in general, most of us just hire a contractor to come out and do that, and that's the safest way to get that done, because they're certified and they want to take your money, so they'll come out and do that on a regular basis. But test those systems on a regular basis. Fire breaks. For those of you who have a wildland interface or a lot of vegetation around your buildings, take a walk around your building and say, if a fire gets going here, could it jump from the vegetation to our building? If it might, then you might want to do some trimming. Get out there and think, if a fire happens, what do we want to have protected? If there's a fire coming, what am I going to be out here with a chainsaw frantically cutting down to protect our building? And take that stuff out. let's think ahead before the fire starts. Protect your property around. Think about vegetation around buildings. Propane tanks. In some areas we're using propane fuel. Make sure those propane tanks are at least 10 feet from your building. And for larger size tanks, that space is going to increase. And put them on a cement pad, or at minimum, go out and keep that vegetation away from those tanks, because they can cause severe destruction if a fire happens around those facilities. Hot work permits. Any process that we're doing that produces a spark or excess level of heat is called hot work. And any one of those can end up causing a fire where we can lose our buildings. So our recommendation is that you have a hot work permit program. So when the HVAC contractor comes out to climb up on the roof and work on something, how do we know what they're going to do up there? Do you think it's going to involve a torch or a grinder or something that's going to produce a spark or a flame? If it does, that's a risk to your building, and they may be long gone before the fire starts. So we want to have a policy and a program put in place to protect our facilities. So if somebody's going to weld or cut or grind, anything that makes a spark, they need to come to a designated person and secure a hot work permit. Tags are great to have as part of that because it gives you a checklist to go by, but we need to have notification and gather the information on what type of extinguishing equipment will be available. Will it be there so they can quickly take care of any fire that happens? Is there a requirement to remove combustible material before somebody starts cutting or welding? Do they have other aids out there like fire blankets or things to protect property? Do we isolate that heat and fire, and a fire watch? After the hot work has been done, do we go back after a half hour and maybe after a couple of hours and just verify that everything is okay and we don't have a fire there smoldering? All right. And folks, go ahead and type any questions that you have into the chat box or the Q&A box. I'm covering a lot of material here, so just want to remind you to put those questions in. So flammable storage. Is gasoline a flammable liquid? You know, we always think of acetone or alcohol or xylene or one of those chemicals that we have out there that involves paint or something as a flammable liquid. But gasoline is probably the most ubiquitous flammable liquid that we have, and we don't treat it with the respect that we probably should. We have gas cans sitting out in a shop that don't have a lid on those. They're not stored in a flammable cabinet. We should treat those as a full-on flammable liquid because they are. So have a flammable storage cabinet. If you've got more than 5 gallons total of flammable liquids in your facility, and even less, I would say any flammable liquids, you should secure those in a flammable storage cabinet. Put those in a cabinet. Have liquids that you're dispensing in a safety can as well. If we're dispensing, make sure we have proper grounding on those pieces of dispensing equipment so we don't get static electricity sparks. Keep containers closed when we're not actively using them. So one, so we don't breathe the stuff, but two, so we prevent the fires that could happen from that. Okay. All right. Oh, and I had one last thing on there. Manage your inventories. Look out through your facilities and ask yourself, when is the last time we used those flammable liquids? Are we ever going to use that again? If you're not, or you're not planning on using it for a long time, get rid of it. Let's eliminate the risk of having that stuff in our facilities. Aerosols are one of those hot button items that I don't like. If I go in and I see a whole bunch of aerosols, I get pretty nervous because those aerosols, when exposed to fire, become rockets, and then they explode, filling your building with flammable gases. Pretty much, if you get an aerosol fire going, you're not going to save your building. So take those flammable aerosols or aerosol cans and put them in a storage cabinet. Flammable storage cabinet is the best. If you don't have that right now, put those in some sort of a metal cabinet to contain the aerosols. All right. Think about what you buy so we don't end up with extra materials that we don't need. Solvent tanks, these are not as common as they used to be because they're kind of messy things and it costs a lot to dispose of the waste. But if you have one, ensure that it has a fusible link in place. You can see on this slide here, this is a little metal tab made out of lead or other soft metal that when it's exposed to a fire, it melts and it allows that lid to fall closed. So make sure that's in place. Sometimes it looks like that. Sometimes it's just a little round plug that will melt, and ensure that the lid doesn't have parts in the way to keep it from falling down. This is an automatic system, so if that solvent tank catches on fire, the lid closes and in many cases will extinguish the fire on its own. Okay. Battery charging stations are also a big source of fire. Why is that? Well, we've got a couple of things going on. Number one, lead acid batteries produce hydrogen gas when they're recharging. That hydrogen gas gets into the air, and it doesn't take a whole lot of it to actually cause a flame. What else do we have going on when we're charging batteries? Well, there's a good chance that we're going to have a spark. As we have those leads connected there, they can move around causing a spark and can cause your battery to explode, literally blow up in your face. So a couple of things to think about on battery charging. Proper ventilation in those areas. Don't charge batteries in an enclosed space. Separate from ignition sources. And that could be something as simple as a water heater or a furnace that might be in the area where we've got a pilot light. That's an ignition source. Make sure the electrolyte is full in those batteries. If we allow any vapor space in there above beyond what's normal for that battery, hydrogen gas can build up, producing a mini bomb, and it can blow acid all over us. Compressed gases, next level. Many of you have compressed gases, so let's look at our storage on those compressed gases. Secure those with a chain, with a cage. Keep our fuels and oxidizers separate, so if we've got oxygen or chlorine, those should be at least 20 feet away from any fuels, acetylene, propane, other combustible materials that might be out there. Separate them by distance or by a firewall, so we don't get those together that can make a really nasty fire. Keep your caps in place. Store those in an off position. If we're not using it, it should be off. If that oxyacetylene cart's not going to be used for who knows how long, months, take the valves off and put the caps back in place. Flashback protection, if we have a pipe system, is another thing. If you have questions about that, we can give you some details. And once again, manage your inventories. Think how much acetylene do we need? We've only used one tank in the last 2 years. Well, don't have 3 in inventory. Just have what you need. So welding, cutting, brazing, once again, dangerous tasks. So let's have a designated fireproof area. A lot of times in shops we'll see a lot of combustible materials stored right next to an area where we're doing welding and cutting, and all it takes is that spark to fly over and get into the combustible material. It may take a while to start blazing, but it'll sit there and smolder. And maybe after we go home at night, it can burn our building down. So hot work permits on that if it's outside of that designated area, fire watch, proper personal protective equipment, all of those things. For some reason, that worked twice. All right. So material storage, really, really common issue as we go and do risk assessments at your facilities is combustible storage in mechanical rooms. Under code, there should be no combustible storage within your mechanical room, meaning those electrical rooms where you've got your panels or where the water heater and HVAC systems are. There should be no combustible storage, cardboard, paper, anything like that. And these tend to be places where, well, we got visitors coming. We're going to stuff we're going to stuff whatever it is we don't want people to see inside of that room, and it puts us at risk because they're unseen spaces, and you've got flame sources, you've got electrical, and it's a great place to get a fire started to burn your building down. So inspect those on a monthly basis, and just kind of look at how you're storing all of your materials, particularly combustibles, cardboards, paper, pallets. Don't have stacks of pallets sitting outside of your buildings. Get rid of those or move those away from the buildings. That's a really easy place for an arsonist, somebody who doesn't like you, to go and start a simple fire that might take your entire building out. They don't have to break in or anything, just get that pile of pallets going. So get rid of them or separate those from your buildings or other things you don't want to burn. Tires. Sometimes we store a huge amount of tires. Well, they have a lot of potential as a combustible material to burn our buildings down. All right, great wildfire app on your app store that you can get from the Red Cross. Got checklists, alerts, just tons of great material on that app. So check that one out. Electrical hazards. Another one of the very common issues that we see during risk assessment are electrical issues. You can see here we've got some cords that were not intended to be used permanently, not intended to be used outdoors. We've got some splitters on those things. It's a problem, and it's tied to the building. What happens if that fails? There's a chance that we could shock somebody or potentially burn our building down. All right, we want to use qualified electricians anytime we're doing any wiring, pulling new wires or changing the load on a circuit. Keep access clear to your electrical panels. Don't have open panel slots for a couple of reasons. One, people could be shocked. Two, if we happen to have an arc flash in there, that could allow that to get out and cause a fire or hurt somebody. Don't put tape on breakers. Make sure all of your breakers are labeled. Even if it's a spare, write spare on there so we know what it is. The cause of some of the fires that we've had have been from people flipping breakers, but they didn't know what they were, and they turned something on where there was an abandoned circuit or a problem somewhere else, and it caused a fire a distance away from where that breaker panel was, and they didn't even realize that it was happening. So let's look at a couple of things. Just keeping our access to our panels open, so in an emergency we have that. Some wiring that maybe isn't appropriate. This was 480 volt wiring. By the way, I didn't check what else was going on in that panel when I found this one because I didn't want to get shocked. Anyway, think about that. Use a licensed electrician to come and do work like that. Thermal imaging. This is one that we've recommended for a long time. Look at especially at your heavy load systems. If you've got 480 volt systems or other heavy, higher voltage, heavy load systems, take a look at these on a regular basis with a thermal imaging camera. These cameras, when I first started in the biz, when they first came out, were $20,000 or $30,000. And I found one. It's called FLIR one. I'm not advocating this one specific product, but it's the one that I know that's out there. FLIR has been in the business forever. They came out with a thermal imaging camera that plugs into your iPhone or Android device, and it will work right using the camera function on your phone. You plug it in, and you can see the heat. What's the big deal with thermal imaging? Well, as you can see in these pictures, you can tell that one of those circuits in both pictures is drawing a lot more load than others, and there's a lot of heat there. Well, that can indicate that we may have a problem with a piece of equipment, or we may have a fire setting up for us later. So anyway, I talk about this thermal imaging camera. It used to be $20,000 or $30,000. You can buy this one for about $250. And it will plug right into your smartphone and give you that level of assurance that yeah, we've checked these things, and it's a great troubleshooting thing for looking at your pumps, motors, because if we get a pump that's running out of out of balance, that can end up causing failure of that and cost us tens of thousands of dollars. Coiled cords are bad because we generally put too big of loads on those. So you want to make sure that we've specified what loads we're getting. We see these in fire stations quite a bit, and fire engines draw a tremendous load. And sometimes they'll heat up like this coil of wire and burn the fire station down. We've seen that happen several times around the country. Abandoned equipment, make sure you pull those circuits out. If we're not going to use it anymore, get rid of it. Automatically firing equipment, whether it be a backup generator or battery packs, battery backups, we need to know what they are, where they're located. That little UPS system that you have under your desk, little battery backup so your computer doesn't lose files when the power goes out, could be the source of fire. I've seen dozens and dozens of fires started with those little battery backups. So don't put that battery backup on top of your recycle bin or underneath your recycle bin. Keep the combustibles away from it and inspect those on a regular basis. Lightning, boy, I'll tell you, I've gone long. Identify your risks. So we have different facilities out there. Many of you might have a cupola on or a tower on some of your buildings. That might be the highest thing in the neighborhood, and it puts your building at risk. So if you have that, look at the lightning risks there. This is the historic Cache County Courthouse. I've been up in that tower there, and they've done a great job of putting some lightning protection on that because it's definitely at risk. Floods. Floods happen, and we kind of look at them in two different ways, inside versus outside floods, because it's different from an insurance perspective. So water damage, from an insurance perspective, these floods need to be sudden and unexpected. If you've got a leak in, say, in your laundry room, that hose on the back of your washer has been dripping for months, and it causes damage to your subfloor or to the walls in your home, and you call up your property insurer and say, hey, I've got a flood issue here. They're probably going to say, well, that's not covered. It needs to be sudden and unexpected. And so that's kind of how we look at those things. If it's a normal, regular maintenance water issue in our facilities, we need to be performing regular maintenance on those. But sudden and unexpected, those floods will happen from time to time. Let's go through a couple of things. If you have a flood, whatever the source, whether it be a sewer backup or a stormwater flood, you need to take care of that right now. You need to get that water out as soon as possible. If you have the resources, go ahead and handle that. But many times we have to get a professional in to clean that out. What's the big deal about leaving water? Well, it can cause many issues over time, mold and other damage to our facilities. I'm going to go quick here. Some best management practices on this. We should be performing fair weather inspections. So something as simple as making sure our downspouts are clear and our gutters are clear when it's nice and warm and dry outside will save us a lot of problems with flooding if we happen to get that sudden gully washer that comes out of the sky. Frost-proofing, protecting prior to winter will help us as well to keep from having those pipes break. Regularly replace hoses. So if we have a fixed hose in place, just the example is in your home, in your laundry room. Those hoses will fail over time. So on a regular basis, you should be changing those out and replacing those with new ones. Drip pans around our water heaters, other equipment like that. Leak detection. If we've got a basement where nobody works and we rarely go down there, they have some neat little water alarms that you put a battery in, you set them on the floor, and if water comes up to a point, it crosses two connections over, and a really annoying sound goes off. That's cheap, probably less than $10 to buy one of those alarms, and it can save thousands and thousands of dollars. Okay. All right. No, I'm going to go quick because I've gone long. All right. Yeah, great Run Across app on floods as well to help you prepare with that. Got to hurry because I wanted to go through the new property program just in brief. Once again, on mold. Mold is bad if we allow it to get bad. So if you have water issues, handle it right away. If you have mold issues, talk to us and we can give you some guidance on that because it can be nasty. Earthquakes. We all think, yeah, that'd be terrible to have an earthquake, but we probably all sit back, oh, it's not going to happen to me. We just don't think it's going to happen. We are way overdue for a big earthquake. And I don't say that trying to invite it, just to warn us that is something that we are going to face maybe in our lifetimes, and it could produce some really severe consequences. I go through all those, but I gotta hurry. This is an earthquake hazard map from all over the country, and guess what? We have fairly high hazard in this area. Some parts of the state worse than others. And you can see this at the bottom left. This picture has earthquakes that have happened in the state of Utah, and it's kind of surprising. The area where we have the most earthquakes are the most populous areas of the state. The Wasatch Front being the most at risk. All right, come on. Okay. Then I clicked the button twice. How did I do that? All right. So on earthquakes, do your homework, know what you're getting into, plan and prepare. I recommend that you get involved with the Great Utah Shakeout. That just happened here a couple of months ago. But let's do drills on earthquakes as well. It takes less than a half an hour to do a drill and figure out, do we have any risks as far as our people go? Do they understand what to do? So that's important stuff. Okay, a few things on earthquake preparation. Seismic bracing, whether it's the library where we have bookshelves that can tip over on people, or whether it's water heaters that might tip over and break the gas line and then cause our building to burn down. Fire suppression systems can be at risk to seismic activity as well. I've got a couple of pictures on this next slide. So that water heater, should be strapped to the wall. A piece of plumber's tape or a bracket on there to keep it from tipping. It also should have a flex coupler. You can see that yellow line there to allow it to move independently of the gas line, so we don't break that gas line. The fire protection systems that we have, sprinklers, they should have seismic bracing as well, and that's what these pictures are showing. That heater hanging up there also has that flex gas line to allow it to move when the building starts moving. Okay, Great Red Cross app, once again, give you a ton of information on that, and also the Utah Shakeout page, web page has some awesome information to help us out in our preparation. Come on. All right. Oh, good. I was worried I was going to take you way too long, folks. I wanted to talk, before I summarize though, I wanted to talk just briefly. We just recently announced a new property program with some excellent additions to our coverage. We're always out there looking at how we can better serve the membership and get better coverage. And we've really got a great change that happened. It's effective May 1st. We increased our property limit to $1 billion per occurrence. That's a shared limit between us, but that's a huge amount of coverage that we have, and so we're really excited to be able to offer that. We also eliminated the earthquake zones. Before it depended on which zone you were in. Now it's spread across the entire state. That same limit. This is a great thing from there. Let's see. I wanted to talk about. People have questions about flood and earthquake coverage. That's part of your regular property coverage. If you do have facilities, buildings within a flood zone A or other flood zones, Make sure you talk to your account executive on that to ensure that we have proper coverage for those type of areas. I wanted to talk, I should talk about this at first. When we talked about scheduling your buildings and other facilities, we will be, every 3 years we go out and do a property inspection, or not inspection, property appraisal for all of your facilities. This is a free service that we have. This is something that would save you a ton of money, but it also allows us to get good, accurate appraisals on the value of your facilities. So within the next year, I believe they said that we'll do that this year. We have a company, Lowry and Associates. They're a new company that we're using. They're based in Utah, and they will be contacting you to come and do those property appraisals. This is a great opportunity for you to look at your facilities again and say, do we have everything scheduled? We've had situations where people had, members had multi-million-dollar buildings that they had simply forgot. They built this building and they forgot to add it to their coverage, and it was caught in this process of doing the property appraisals. So this is a great service that we hope you'll appreciate, and they're going to start out for those that have not had an appraisal within the last 3 years, and then they'll work through all of you. So let's see. I think I've covered all the stuff that I had there. If you have questions, please go ahead and type those in, and I'll wrap up here. This is something, you know, looking at fires, floods, other potential emergencies that we have out there, property damage things. It's something that's easy to put on the back burner and not think about. Let's make a goal today to write down, here's a list of things that we need to do. We need to be performing regular monthly inspections. We need to identify what our risks are. So today, everybody has permission to go for a walk. Walk around your facility and take some notes, take some pictures, and then take that to your safety committee and say, I walked around the facility and I'm worried about this vegetation, or we've got a storage issue here, or what about this, what about that? Come up with those items, take it to the safety committee, and then just start knocking those off one at a time. If we'll do that, we're all better off, and then we avoid those big losses that really affect us all. Okay, I think that's all I had. Just looking here to see if we've got any questions. Doug, Brent, either of you have anything to add? What did I miss?
Dad, you did a great job.
Notice those cameras went off.
Well, we were worried about your bandwidth there, so.
Yeah. All right. Nothing to add, Doug? You always got something to add.
No, sounds good, Jason. I don't see any questions.
I don't see any questions either. Thanks, folks, for tuning in, and we appreciate your attendance here, and we appreciate all of your efforts. You don't realize how important you are in the entire process of just taking these simple actions that will, you know, potentially save others' lives, save our property, and you know, lots of money that all of us share as well. So we appreciate that, and we'll let you go out and have a safe day. Be careful on your walk around, and remember, 3 points of contact, right, Doug?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Thanks, folks. Have a safe day.